You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
And a very warm welcome to another episode of Haunted Histories with yours truly, Penny G. Morgan. Well, did you enjoy last week's show on Ghosts of the Workhouse? Good. If you didn't enjoy it, then all criticism to the BBC, please. That's a joke, if you didn't work out. If you haven't listened yet, what are you playing at? It's all there, ready and waiting for you on Spreaker and YouTube. And as I'm obliged to say, all the other Parasearch shows are there too, that you've not had the chance to catch up on. Go and fill your boots and spend the next 5 hours listening to shows. Well, after mine, obviously, because you're here listening to this now, so you might as well listen to this first. Right, it's competition time. Our gorgeous friends at Fright Nights London have been kind enough to give us two free tickets to their investigation at the superb Fort Horsted on the 17th of March. Fort Horsted is down in Kent, in case you didn't know. Now, if you want a chance to win said tickets, go over to the Parasearch group page, give the competition post a quick like, leave a comment so we know you want to win them, and then sit back and wait until next week's Haunted History show, where my guest will be Tammy Guyamadi, and we're going to be talking about Prague and the kind of underground city underneath Prague. Full terms and conditions are on the post. Right. The next thing I want to say is a bit of a begging request. I'm running at the Brighton Marathon in April. I don't know what has possessed me to do it, because I absolutely hate running. But I thought it might be a good way to raise money for Dementia UK and the work they do, providing support and guidance to the families and carers of people with this horrible disease of dementia. If you've never heard of Admiral Nurses, go and have a look. I suppose the easiest thing to say is they're kind of the dementia equivalent of Macmillan Nurses, I suppose. But if you can spare a few quid to incentivise me to keep going, I would greatly appreciate it, you lovely lot. So thank you. Hi Kerry, good evening. So, tonight we're going to be heading down under and talking with blogger and investigator Sarah Chimacero of Living Life in Full Spectrum about a place which she absolutely loves, and loves so much that she co-created a group to run investigations there to raise its profile and help fund the continuation of the place as a museum and attraction. I will admit, before Sarah mentioned this place to me, I, like many others, I would guess, especially people outside of Victoria, Australia, had never heard of it. But it is a genuinely intriguing building once you start looking into it. Thanks for posting that, Kerry. Kerry's just kindly posted up to the link to my begging page for Dementia UK on the chat room if anyone is interested in helping a girl out. Well, Blackrock. Hi, Carly. Blackrock itself, it is a strange place. When you look at just the pictures of it, it looks like a normal sort of, I suppose, Australian sort of, I don't know, homestead. But when you look up further, it has a massive castle-type wall around it. Now, nobody really knows why. Was it to keep people out, or was it more to do with the owner's eccentric personality? Now, I'm not going to try and do too much on history because Sarah knows so much more about this place than I could ever find out. But the guy who built it was somebody by the name of Charles Ebden, and he built it in 1856, and it was finished in 1858. And he was actually the first Auditor General of Victoria. He was born in 1811 in South Africa and was renowned for being a wee bit of a character, being both a pastoralist, that is a sheep farmer to you and I, politician and businessman. His peculiarities of temperament, so said by the then Lieutenant Governor Charles Latrobe, led to him quickly being frustrated by his role as Auditor General, as he didn't like having to defend policies which he had no part in making. And also, it's believed, his non-promotion to Colonial Treasurer led to his resignation in 1852 from politics. Hi, Kaz! He did become involved with future administrations in some fashion, but refused actually to take on a role in government due to his anti-land squatting beliefs, potentially causing problems for the government's land bills. Now, Ebden was seen as a bit of a dandy, and he quite fancied himself as a kind of a Beau Brummel type character. Now, for anyone who doesn't know who Beau Brummel was, he was an iconic figure in Regency England, and for many years the arbiter of men's fashion, and at one time he was a close friend of the Prince Regent, the future King George IV. A dandy could also be described as a self-made man who looked to imitate possibly a more aristocratic lifestyle, despite coming from more middle-class or slightly lower leanings. It didn't end well for Beau Brummel, though. He died destitute and penniless from syphilis in Caen in France, after running away there to escape debtors' prisons due to his gambling and lifestyle debts. Actually, debtors' prisons, that's not something we've talked about on the show before, is it? Maybe I should find something to talk about, because that does tie in quite closely with the workhouse movement. Anyway, I'm digressing, I apologise. Ebden was a bit luckier than Beau. He moved back to England in 1861 and spent about 5 years there, albeit in quite poor health and virtually an invalid due to his asthma. Upon returning to Australia in 1866, his health did improve quite a bit, but he died about 12 months later in 1867, leaving an estate worth over $100,000 to his wife. Now, I did a little bit of a calculation on here. I'm, a financial advisor by trade, and I reckon that sum would probably have been equivalent to around £10 million now. So, his infamous line, "I fear I have become disgustingly rich," was probably true. So, enough of that. Shall we hear all about this house that Ebden built and Sarah's experiences with it? Stay with me. Okay, and we're now joined by one of my absolutely gorgeous friends from down under, Australia, if anyone doesn't realise where I'm talking about. She not only is she very gorgeous, she's also a part of Paranormal X-Files. She's also part of Haunted Informer, and she also does a brilliant blog, which you've probably seen shared on the Parasearch page, called Living Life in Full Spectrum. Mrs. Sarah Chumacero! How are you doing?
Hello! Good, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you very much. Thank you ever so much for taking the time. It's sort of early mid-morning where you are, isn't it?
It is. It's almost lunchtime on a Sunday for me.
Oh. And how warm is it in Australia right now?
It's only going to be 22 today, so a lot colder.
Only.
But yesterday was 30. So.
Oh, shut up. Shut up. We only started getting rid of the snow where I am today, so I'm jealous of those temperatures. I'm jealous.
It's been nice, but we're in the end of the year now, or the start of the year. We've just hit autumn, so it's going to start getting cold very quickly over the next month.
Yeah, but cold for you is not cold for us, is it?
No. My cold's kind of like maybe 15.
See, that's still t-shirt
really
weather.
Cold.
That's t-shirt weather.
That's really cold.
Oh dear,
oh my God, crank it up.
Oh, you wouldn't cope over here, my love. You wouldn't cope. You'd be sitting there in jumpers in our summer, I think.
No.
Well, the reason Sarah's on the show tonight, apart from the fact we love her, I mean, you may remember her from one of Kerry's shows. I can't remember what you discussed. What was it you discussed?
It was just all about the blog and just all about what I've done paranormal investigating and just discussing a few of the different articles and general topics in the paranormal that we all sort of love to deal with, like orbs. We had a great discussion about orbs.
Yeah, we won't go there tonight. Yeah, 2 things are off the list: orbs and demons. We're not talking about those tonight. If that's
no
right.
Demons. No, that's
demons.
fine by me.
No,
which one?
Fine. Which one? Yeah. For anyone you may not get the joke, Sarah's brother Glenn is also part of the groups that Sarah works with, and he studied demonology with. It was somebody quite well known.
He did it with Bishop Long.
That's it.
So he's the dude that's in Ghost Adventures, that does all the exorcisms in Ghost Adventures.
And Glenn has a perfect comeback for anyone who says there's a demon in their property or the residence they're in. And what's his comeback, Sarah?
He says, which one?
Yeah.
Because in demonology, the demons all have, a name. And usually people say, what? What do you mean? What do you mean, which one? What do you mean, what's their name?
See, I like his style. I do like his style. I have passed that information on to people, so he might have to copyright it soon so he starts earning money off that question.
Yes. So for anyone listening, it belongs to Glenn.
So we're not going to discuss demons and we're not going to discuss orbs.
No.
But if anyone has read any of Sarah's blogs, her articles, I say we do share them on the Parasearch page. They are really interesting, and I know Sarah's always appreciative of feedback and comments and everything else. And I know from my perspective, when I'm doing these kind of shows, feedback and comments and stuff, it normally gives you ideas for more shows. So yes. I'm sure you're the same, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I'll have people contact me and even just say, hey, what about this topic? Or they'll just say, have you written about this? Or what do you think of this issue? And I'll say, hey, you know what? I'll do an article on it. Or they just want to know my thoughts. Why don't you do an article on this topic? Yeah. And I've had quite a few of that happen, and I'm so grateful. It just opens up a whole conversation, because if one investigator thinks it, then obviously lots of others do too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It's because, some people who listen to my show may not have listened to Kerry's when she interviewed you. What got you into the paranormal in the first place?
Initially it was just, I can't say that I had a, compounding experience when I was little or anything like that, because I didn't. I always just sort of believed in the afterlife and had a few, sort of when I was young and a teenager, dabbled in Ouija boards and all that kind of stuff as kids do. I didn't really think much of it, and I actually thought it was all a bunch of crap really at that point. When I became older, when I was 21, my grandfather passed away, and I actually had what I consider to be my first paranormal experience, because I believe that I was sort of making contact with him. And I started watching, the TV shows. So we had TV shows like Ghost Hunters and Most Haunted and all of that thing, and I really enjoyed them. And one day my brother kept saying to me, we need to go out and do an investigation, but I was too scared. And it actually took a couple of years for me to actually get the courage to do it. And I, just went out on one investigation, and I fell in love with it. And I more fell in love with the history behind it, so the stories. And I'd go to a location and they'd say, oh, you're making contact with, say, this particular spirit. So I'd actually go home and I'd actually try to bring up the records and see if I could find out more about this particular person and what they did in life, and, information about the building. So it was combining a love of sort of being able to do research and looking at history, and also getting out there and meeting people and having fun, and just sharing a general interest with other people. And from there it just sort of grew. I met people that we then just started doing more and more investigations together, and you go on Facebook and you join the Facebook groups and all of that, and you start networking. And all of a sudden one day I said, hey, I'm going to write all my experiences down in a blog, because everyone was always very intrigued to know what was happening, because I was doing a lot of things, and it just sort of grew from there. And as the blog became bigger, a lot of people would start asking me for advice and saying, well, how did you get started? You just sort of came from nowhere, which I did. How can I get into the field? And so I then started incorporating a lot of information about how you can get started in the field, and, you know, because anyone can do it, and, you know, just the different issues and things that we face, and, you know, just making it something for everyone, that anyone with an interest in the paranormal, like, you don't have to be a paranormal investigator, but anyone with an interest in the paranormal or history or anything can come along and get something from it. Yeah. So that's sort of where it all started.
Okay. Because you're quite good friends with another friend to Haunted Histories, Bill DeBoney, aren't you?
I am, yeah. I met Bill, and Bill he's very well known in Australia, because he runs Australian Paranormal Society with his wife Mandy, and pretty much whenever a new team pops up, and the same thing happened with us, is Bill contacted us to basically say, "Hi, I'm Bill. I'm from Australian Paranormal Society. If you need anything, here's my phone number. You know, give me a call. Welcome, you know, to the paranormal field." Yeah. And he's always there for anyone, you know, to give advice, and he runs some great tours and things like that, and we met up with Bill and just started, you know, going along to a lot of his events and things like that, and became friends.
Yeah, I do love Uncle Bill. I do enjoy he's
lovely, and we have such a great time with him, and he has so much knowledge. He is just a wealth of knowledge. You can go to any location and he can sit and tell you so many stories about the history, and, you know, just stuff that people don't know. It's amazing how much information he knows. He's like the paranormal encyclopedia.
Him and I bounce off each other when we're chatting, literally, from a knowledge perspective.
I've listened to your interviews.
That's only like a third of what we actually talk about. I mean, our calls are normally about, I know we've been chatting for a while before we start recording this, but Bill and I will be chatting history and events, and for probably a good 3 hours. Because, you know, because his knowledge is very varied as well. It's not just on one subject. And because mine's quite varied because of the reading I do for this kind of show, and just from a personal sort of general knowledge, I enjoy reading up on things. We do tend to go from literally one country to another. One
extreme to another.
yeah, it's good, and he is a font of information.
He's lovely.
We learn a lot off each other when we're chatting. I think Bill and I, when we're chatting,
I can imagine.
It is an interesting, and that's lovely actually what you're saying, that he contacts new groups to introduce himself, and that doesn't actually surprise me, because he's a very giving and genuine person. I get the impression, very generous.
He is, and that's why people in the paranormal field all look up to him as well. And, you know, if anyone wants advice, or, you know, needs help with something, Bill's usually the first name that comes up in a conversation, because he's just, I guess we kind of call him like the godfather of the paranormal down here.
And another person you referred to me recently, you contacted on my behalf, was the person you call the Queen of the Paranormal.
Yes, so that's Beth Darlington. Yeah. She runs Access Paranormal up in Sydney, and so she's very much focused on paranormal education for people wanting to learn about the paranormal, and she sort of made it a mission, because when you are looking to study a lot of different things in the paranormal, it can get very technical and very difficult to understand. So she likes to try to kind of break things down to a way that, you know, a person even like me, because when things get technical, for example, I tune out. It's like a mechanism in my brain. It says, no, the words are too big. Stop listening. That's what happens to me.
She's going to be on my show. I think we've booked it in for May.
Excellent.
So she's going to be coming on as well.
She's travelled all over the world and investigated all over the world, so she'll have some fantastic stories for you.
I think we're going to do one on Chernobyl and Pripyat.
Oh, fantastic, yeah. So, she went there last year.
She did tell me I was a girl after her own heart when I said to stay awake doing the interview. I'll be on coffee, Diet Coke and Haribo sweets. So there you go. So obviously you've had even though you're young, you've had quite a long sort of career so far in the paranormal and the history side of it and everything else. How long have you been with we're talking obviously about Black Rock House in Melbourne tonight. How long have you been working with Black Rock?
So we're in, this year is our third year that we're working with Black Rock House.
Right.
So initially it was a completely unknown property. It's a homestead in the middle of suburbia that a lot of people didn't know about, sadly. And we came across it, and went there to do an investigation, and the president was saying to us, we want to get the name out there, and we said, look, let's see what we can work with here. We might be able to run some paranormal investigations from here, because there's also nothing over this side of town. Mm-hmm. And it's quite big at the moment. It will attract a new generation to come through, because that's how you get the young people through the doors these days. They you give them a bit of a paranormal story, they come in, and then they fall in love with the properties. Mm-hmm. So we worked with her and said, let's do that, and we basically investigated there for 6 months. Mm-hmm. Just building our repertoire of information, and then we started running tours in the middle of that year. So this is the third year that we're doing the tours there.
So were those investigations just sort of, I suppose I'll say professional investigators? It wasn't pulling in members of the public, it was just your team investigating?
Yes, so it was just our team. It was just 4 of us, and we would go there pretty much every week and just investigate and see what information we got, and try to validate other information we got, what we could match back to research, and what kind of stories we could build to show people what was there.
Okay. I can hear the boys in the background. Sorry, I was just
laughing. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. They sound like they're having a whale of a time.
They are.
Get them outside. You're in Australia. Go on, them outside.
Go outside.
Yes, you've got
They're actually at the other end of the house, but it echoes.
Really? Oh, crumbs. Sorry. So who's this team that you work with at the moment?
So the Blackrock House Paranormal team is myself, it is Glenn, it is Martin, and it is Ree, and so they're also Paranormal X-Files. Okay. And so we were doing that separately, and so we've brought that over, and we all created Blackrock House Paranormal together.
Ah. And Glenn's your brother?
Yes, he is, yes. Yeah. So
okay.
We used to make a joke he was the bodybuilding ghost hunter.
I actually called him that on one of the shows, I think.
Oh, did you?
Yes. I think I was relaying a story about Aradale. I think it was Bill that told me the story. It was before I got chatting to you a lot, and it said about that one of the investigators there, who's a big lad, he's Sarah's brother, he's a bodybuilder, he's no sort of slouch, got shoved backwards.
Yes,
or something.
Yes, they had to drag him out of the room.
Yeah, and I did, when I was telling someone the story, I said about, the bodybuilding paranormal investigator, or the bodybuilder ghost hunting bodybuilder, or something like that.
It used to be his hashtag. Really? Bodybuilding ghost hunter, yeah.
I like it. So, I mean, you and Glenn do a lot of work together away from Paranormal X-Files, don't you?
Yeah, so he does Haunted Informer, and so he does a lot of video work. He likes to put together a lot of videos, and I sort of help him out with that, in more so if he needs someone to be on camera, because he likes to kind of be behind the camera. Yeah. And I'll help him if he did a documentary last year, actually, for Blackrock House that he spoke at Earthcore about. Uh-huh. And so I did all the filming of that for him. So Haunted Informer is his, but I help him out with it from time to time.
Okay. Well, I'm going to mention a couple of the videos I saw on YouTube of you guys in Blackrock on Haunted Informer in a second. What is it? I mean, I've looked up Blackrock, I've looked at the photos, and it looks a very nice sort of house. Mm-hmm. What is it about it that makes you so passionate?
I think it's just you walk in and it feels like a home, and there's just so many interesting stories to it, like even just down to the different wallpapers in the room and why there's that certain wallpaper in that room, and all the different items that inside the house are donated, and so they all have their own little stories, and it's not just a typical little homestead, because you've got like these big castle gates and this big stable area, and you've got an underground cellar and an outdoor sort of servants' quarters, and all of this is sitting in a suburban street. So there's just normal houses all the way around it, and then there's just this big house with a massive castle gate. It's just, you've never seen anything like it, and you don't see anything like it out here anyway.
Okay, so you mentioned, I mean, we haven't really talked much about the history of the place yet. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was a load of land that was purchased in 1854 by somebody called Charles Ebden.
Correct, yes.
I talked about him a little bit in my intro before we came in with the interview, because I quite like the fact that he's meant to have said that he feared that he was becoming disgustingly rich.
Yes.
I sort of quite like his sort of, he sounds a bit of a cad, but a sort of a pleasant one at that, but it sounds a bit of a character. So
Yes.
he bought this land in 1854.
Yes.
Started building about 2 years later.
Yes, 1856.
Yeah, and it actually went right down to the coast front, didn't it, when it was originally built?
It did. So it was a beach house. So the suburb that it is, I mean, obviously the suburb that it's in now is Blackrock, and the suburb is named after Blackrock House. But it was 122 acres. And it was beach frontage. So they had, you know, of what is now Blackrock, which is the beachside suburb, that was basically all just the property of Blackrock House.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But he only had it as a holiday sort of cottage, for want of a better term, for a few years before he went back to the UK, or he moved to the UK.
Yeah,
is that correct?
it was only about it's only about 7 or 8 years that he actually used the house. The family, they kept it within the family for I think about 50 years, but they didn't really use it a whole lot. It was mainly used to entertain, because he was a politician. He was Victoria's first Auditor General. It was used to actually entertain a lot of the other sort of governors and other politicians, and another sort of famous governor here, Governor La Trobe. He would actually use the house quite a bit for hunting, so they'd stay there on their hunting weekends and things like that. So they used it, I guess, to entertain Melbourne's elite, you could say.
So do we know if anything sort of less than pleasant went on there in that time?
Not historically, so not that we can, validate historically, but sort of when we do our investigations, sometimes not all is as it seems. But you also have to remember, back in the early 1900s, it was used as things like boarding houses and things like that. And a lot of people pick up, different deaths and things of illnesses, and a lot of, I guess, sort of like people dying in childbirth, or kids dying of typhoid and things like that, because all those diseases were quite prevalent. So we do know that all that stuff was happening, but historically we can't match it back happening at the house.
So what's its historical relevance to the history of Melbourne and of Australia? What makes it important to that?
So one of the reasons that it's important is just because of, I guess, how old it is, and it was one of the first houses to be colonised in that area of Melbourne.
Right. And
the fact that it was for Victoria's first Auditor General, he is quite well known here in Australia. He's got, even though he was from South Africa and lived, overseas quite a lot of the time, he passed away here in Melbourne, and he actually has quite a big shrine dedicated to him at the Melbourne Cemetery.
Right.
So he did a lot. He was also the first person that he actually, I think it was transported cattle from New South Wales down to Victoria. Mm-hmm. So he played a really big part in sort of the farming and pastoral side of history here in Melbourne. Okay. And so the fact that he's connected to the house, and that, because he's so eccentric and disgustingly rich, that he would build a house with sort of a castle fort surrounding it makes it a really bizarre piece of history, because all of the homesteads that we have here, they're old, and but they don't have a big castle gate that's almost like a fortress surrounding it.
Right. Okay. What exactly is an Auditor General?
I don't really know.
Oh.
I'm not really up on my politics. Right.
Okay.
But he was. He's quite the politician, apparently.
Okay. So it's not someone I'd heard of until we started talking about it, but I had heard that the saying that I fear I've become disgustingly rich, or whatever it was exactly. I'd heard that before, but I didn't know who that was attributed to. So it's actually quite interesting to hear, actually to read about the person who actually
said it.
Yeah.
And like his money didn't come sort of, from being a politician. It was sort of his work in the transportation of cattle and all of that, and his farming work. And then obviously I believe when he passed away, he had an estate of £100,000, which, okay, that's not a lot of money today, but back then that was, millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Multi-millionaire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if we look at, sort of putting the history of Blackrock to one side, if we look at your experiences of Blackrock, because you visit it on a regular basis, you've been going there for 3 years, so you know the place, you know its vibes, you know its how it feels. Where would you say, if you were gonna, if I came to Melbourne, right? I know we've talked about me doing this, and I will at some point. But if I came,
and you're coming,
I am. Yeah, we've made a deal. You've just got to sweet talk my husband now to let me go.
I'll send a check.
Okay. Where would you want to take me as my first place to go inside Blackrock House, and why?
So the first place that I usually like to take people is into the back bedroom of the living quarters. So it's separate to the house, and it's at the back of the stables, and it's in just this little bedroom. And when you look at it, it doesn't look like anything special. But in there, we believe, is the spirit of a lady called Annie. And she was a servant at Blackrock House, and she initially, when we sort of started doing communications and things with her, she seemed to be upset that no one was acknowledging her, and it was because apparently, and this is just all different information that we've received during our investigations, was that she passed away in her sleep, and so she wasn't actually aware that she had passed away, and so she was wondering why all these people kept coming in and ignoring her. And so once we, found that out, now all of the volunteers that even work there every day, they go in there and they say, "Hi, Annie, how are you today?" And everyone just seems to fall in love with her energy. And whenever anybody leaves, they're like, "We want to go talk to Annie. We want to see if Annie's okay." We've got people that come on our tours and they bring her flowers, and the first thing they say is, "We want to go in and see how Annie is going today," because she just has a kind, gentle energy, and they just love her. So that would be the first place I would take you to go and meet Annie.
You mentioned earlier about one of the things you love about doing this sort of paranormal is the research you can do into the history, into verifying people who've come through.
Yes.
Have you verified anything more about Annie, her life?
No, unfortunately not, because the information that we got, because we haven't been able to get a last name from her.
Right.
And so Annie's obviously a very common name, and we've looked at records of sort of because a lot of people came over from Ireland, and we got the information that perhaps she was Irish. We can't validate exactly who she was, and Annie or Anne is such a common name back then as well. It's extremely difficult. The other problem that we run into with Blackrock House is there isn't actually a lot of records in terms of, the names of people that worked there, the names of caretakers. There is of the initial people that built the house, but not of all the different people that lived there and worked there, over the last 100 or something years.
Okay, so has Annie ever given you any other information that's been quite sort of, made the light bulb go off, and sort of like, oh, that's an interesting one? Or is she more there to sort of care for you and do your bidding, I suppose, as a servant?
No, well, from what we understand is she's sort of there, and there's another spirit that we deal with at Blackrock who is sort of like a caretaker, and we sort of sometimes think he doesn't let her leave the room.
Okay.
And so people don't like that. They feel sorry for that. It seems that she feels that she's taking care of her son there, Lucas. Right. And so they just love the fact that you've got a mum there with her son, and they think, and apparently everyone says, "Why doesn't Annie move on?" We've asked her. She doesn't want to. She wants to stay there. Maybe it feels like her home because she was there for so many years. Maybe it's because she wants to stay there because she thinks her son is there with her, but she doesn't want to go. She feels it's her home. And yeah, no one definitely, we don't get the vibe that she's sort of there to do the bidding. It's definitely just more of a nurturing and kind energy, and people just, I guess, kind of connect with her and resonate with her in a way that, because, if she has been through a lot on some levels, they maybe connect with that and feel that connection with her.
Okay. So if you come to Blackrock House, bring some flowers for Annie and say hello to her.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely at least say hello. And it's lovely because all of the committee love, I'll get emails from the President, Carolyn, after our tour saying, how was last night? Did Annie come and talk to you today? How's Annie going? And whenever all of the volunteers go in, they're all instructed now that they all go into the room and they ask Annie how she is today. And, they'll move her things around and ask, is it okay if I move, this around in your room today, Annie? And do you like the changes I've made to your room? Yeah,
That's
so there's
nice.
just there's so much respect there for her, and everyone just, I can't explain to you why, but everyone just falls in love with her energy. There's just something about it.
Okay. I was watching some of the videos you've made, and there was one you posted up. I think you posted up this morning or last night, whichever it would be classed as, of the most recent. And you're in one of the rooms that you call the death room.
Yes.
Tell me about the death room.
So the death room, we didn't name it the death room. It was named the death room long before we had even heard of Black Rock House. It was named by the volunteers. And that was because whenever they would do they run historical day tours or have council workers come through and do work. And whenever anyone would walk in that room, they didn't like the feeling of the room, and they would feel like they're rocking on a boat. They just had this really off feeling, like they wouldn't want to sit on the bed because they just kind of felt like someone perhaps died in the bed. And a lot of people just said it had a really bad smell to it, in that it was the smell of death, but only certain people could smell this smell, and it wasn't there all the time.
Right.
And so the volunteers affectionately would call it the death room. And the first time I went to Black Rock House and they gave me a tour, this is before they even knew that I was interested in looking at it from a paranormal point of view, and they said, oh yes, now this is the death room. So oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So the bed, and with the story with the bed's actually been donated from somewhere else, and a lot of people feel that they feel the energy that someone has actually passed away in the bed. Some people have said it was someone during childbirth, and other people have said that it was a lady who fell and bumped her head and then passed away in the bed from a head injury, and that we've had multiple people actually come up with that. So we don't tell people these stories. We let them come in, and we get a lot of obviously psychics and sensitive people come through, and they all seem to come back to us with the same information, which I find to be quite interesting, because again, we can't back it up historically. I can't back up historically that, if someone had died in that particular bed. So to have several different people, I guess with some sort of connection to the spirit world, all saying that they're picking up on the same thing energy wise, to me, I find that quite intriguing.
Do we know how old the bed is?
I have it somewhere. It's quite old. I think it's from the early 1900s from memory.
Okay. So it wouldn't have been unusual for people to have given birth in their home bed. It wouldn't have been unusual for someone to die in their own bed. It wouldn't have been... So it could have some kind of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I mean,
we do know that there was a child born at Black Rock House as well. There is a historical record of a child being born at Black Rock House. It was one of the caretaker's daughters that was born in the house.
Right.
So we know that historically that happened, but there would have definitely been a lot more childbirths happening as well, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I know, watching the video that you made on it, the only thing I got from that room is it didn't seem a very warm room. Does that make sense?
And people don't like it, and even just some people can't even walk into the room. They feel like it has an invisible barrier that's stopping them from going in, or some people just walk in, I just don't like the feeling of the room. Something just doesn't feel right. And I can't tell you what it is, but it is, the energy is just, it's quite off. And we'll say to people, we'll all walk into the house, and I have a group of say 15 people, and we'll say, okay, walk through the house and see what room, draws you, and then we'll start investigating. And most people will straight away go to that room.
So have you had any experiences in it?
In that particular room, I mean, I've become emotional before, but probably the best thing that has ever happened in that room is it was 2 years ago. It was the end of our first year, and it was our very last tour on the end of our first year working at Black Rock House. And we were all standing in the room, and I was in the room with Glenn, and we were running a group, and Martin was out in the hallway, so far away from that room, and the door was closed, and we were just sort of talking And it's one of those moments where, you know how when you're not concentrating on investigating and you're just talking and then, you know, something happens? It was one of those moments. And the door, all of a sudden, the handle like turned and unlatched and opened. So we thought, oh, it's Martin coming inside. And then no one came in. And so I've opened the door and looked out in the hallway and he wasn't there. And so I've had to walk out into a different hallway at the other end of the house and said, did you just try to come and walk through the door? And he's like, no, I didn't, but something's going on out here. I'm hearing noises and all sorts of things. And so I went back in and said, oh, okay. So we closed the door to see, you know, and tried to just push it to see if maybe the wind blew it open or what would open the door, and nothing. We couldn't debunk it. It was almost like someone had just turned and opened the door. It's bizarre, and it's one of those things that we haven't been able to explain, and it's never happened again either.
Wow. Well, at least you weren't on your own when it happened, so you've got people to witness
that
it happened.
And yes, and we have it on video somewhere as well.
Oh, wow.
So, which is great. And because we initially thought, and this is why it's really good to have a video on an investigation as well, we originally thought that the man standing in front of the door perhaps maybe knocked the door or turned it himself. So when we went and reviewed the video, we could actually see where the door was and where he was in relation to the door, and you can actually see that he wasn't even touching the door when it happened. So that was a really good thing that we had the video camera running, that we were able to actually figure out what was going on at the time. Because otherwise we would have just thrown it out and said, no, it was him.
So with do you know if the death room was like the main bedroom of the master bedroom of the house?
I assume that it perhaps was.
Right.
Just because of its location and its size, and because the two back bedrooms are a lot smaller, and then the other bedroom connected to what was a bathroom. So I assume it was, but we honestly, we just don't know.
Right, okay. Sorry, go on, love.
No, all I was going to say is after it was used as a homestead, because it was used as sort of a boarding house and then sort of converted into flats and self-contained flats and that sort of thing, a lot of the structure inside the house wasn't the same.
Okay. And you mentioned the wallpaper is all different throughout the house, and the wallpaper in that particular room, if you watch Sarah's video that's on her I think it's on is it on your blog or on your personal page? I can't remember.
It's on the Living Life in Full Spectrum Facebook page.
Yeah. It's quite bold wallpaper, shall we say?
Yes.
But you say it's different throughout the house.
Yeah, so every room has a different wallpaper, and they tried to pick wallpaper that was true to that era. But in a few of the rooms, what they actually found when they were doing the restoration work and they were peeling back all the layers of paint and wallpaper, they actually found traces of original wallpaper. So they actually paid to have it restored. And
wow.
I know in two of the rooms, one of the children's bedrooms and in the drawing room, it's actually a replica of the original wallpaper that was first put at Black Rock House. So in one of the children's bedrooms, which is quite bizarre, the wallpaper is from the pictures from the story Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Right.
And which is a book about obviously slavery and etc. So it's quite weird to have that in a children's bedroom, and it's the actual pictures from the book. And that was the wallpaper in that room. So they actually had that restored, paid a lot of money to have it recreated. And so the wallpaper that sits there today is like it was, 150 years ago, with pictures from Uncle Tom's Cabin.
I think that'd give me nightmares if I was a child.
Yeah, it looks creepy, and just because they have it decorated with sort of, an old rocking horse and older dolls, it just has that, creepy bedroom feel.
Okay, so let's talk about the children's bedroom then.
Yeah.
Do you go in there as part of your tour?
Yeah, we go in all the rooms, and that particular room, we had a really interesting. It was on one of our private investigations that we did. A lot of people would report in one particular corner that they always felt really cold, and there was one area that was colder than others. And in the paranormal, we kind of feel that when a spirit manifests itself, it makes what we call a cold spot. And so we were trying to figure out what was going on, and there's no draft coming in or anything like that, so there's nothing that we could explain why that particular area would get cold. So we had what are called data loggers, and so we set them up around the bedroom, and what they do is they basically take a reading every 10 seconds of what the temperature is in the vicinity of that area. So we had one set up in that corner, and on that particular night, the temperature was around 24 degrees, and it dropped to -4 over the period of 20 seconds, and then went back up to 24 degrees, and we have been unable to debunk it. We don't know, it's never happened again. We don't know if it's a malfunction of the equipment or what had happened, but it's just, again, one of those things that we couldn't explain, and it was validating that, you know, in the same spot that everyone says that it gets cold.
I mean, let's be honest, you don't do minus temperatures in Australia.
No, we don't. I mean, not where I am anyway. I mean, the coldest that we'll get is maybe 7 degrees during the day. So for it to get to -4, especially when it's, you know, reading an ambient temperature of around like 22 or 23 degrees, that's massive
amazing.
drop.
That's amazing. So you've taken me down to the back bedroom to say hello to Annie. We've been to the death room to sort of see what we can sense in there. And like I say, watching your video on it, the room just on the video doesn't look particularly inviting.
No.
That was the vibe I got from just the video. Nothing personal to you, my love.
That's fine.
The bits of the room that you were showing, I was thinking, no, I wouldn't want to spend the night in there. We've talked about the children's room. Where else would you take me?
So we also love the dining room in Blackrock House. There's a couple of stories when we actually went in there, and they were telling us the story of, they had a guy from the council coming in, and he was sitting at the table just doing his paperwork. And so he's in the dining room doing his paperwork, and he looked up and he saw a woman sort of dressed in a white gown. He thought it was one of the volunteers, because they actually dress up in costumes to do their tours, and looked up, and then, you know, went down from his paperwork, looked up, and she was gone. And so he went to go and sort of see where she was, and she was nowhere. And he went up and said, well, where is this lady? Like, what did you want? And they're sort of like, well, what lady? And, he kind of freaked out and left because he realised that perhaps who he was talking to wasn't who he thought. And probably the weirdest part about the dining room is, if you've seen photos of it, there's a massive big round mirror on the top of the mantle. And we've been told by the volunteers that back in the early 2000s, they had some psychics come out basically to do a reading on the house to see what they could find, because they were going to get some ghost tours written up. And apparently they used that room to do a seance, and supposedly they have used the mirror as a portal. And they didn't close it. Apparently, this is what we've been told. And so it seems to be that, and a lot of people, when they walk into the room, and particularly sensitive people, they don't like the mirror. They don't like to have their back turned to the mirror. And some people will even sort of, they don't quite scry, which is where you sort of, you know, stare into the mirror until you see something else. But sometimes they'll look into the mirror and they'll see something else, or not see themselves. And a lot of people believe it's almost like it's acting as the doorway for things coming in and out.
Have you had an experience with it?
When we do sort of sessions in that room, it seems to be sort of the central room where a lot happens. So whether that's to do with the mirror or not, I'm not sure. It could also be the equipment that we're using, because sometimes, because of where we are, we're near the water and we're in a big residential area. So we often get, I guess, spirits coming through that don't belong to Blackrock House. So whether that's because of the mirror or just because of the location of where we are and what we're doing, I'm not 100% sure. But quite often when we're in that room, there's always stuff going on in the hallway. It's almost like it's trying to draw us out of that room. And almost every time we do something in that room, there's noises happening out in the hallway, or people will look out and they're seeing shadows sort of darting in and out of the bedrooms, or hearing footsteps going up and down the hallway when there's no one there. And it always seems to happen when we're in that dining room.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, because when I was watching some of the Haunted Informer videos, and there was one that I think you and Glenn are using a ghost box, and it's got like a Marshall amplifier as your speaker, which, you know, I did think that was quite cool coming from a music background. I did quite like that, especially with the effects pedals either side of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was quite novel. Never seen that before.
Quite controversial, that.
I liked it. Was the room you were doing that in the dining room? Because
quite possibly, because that's usually where we do it. That for some, we've tried it in a lot of other rooms, but it's in that room that we seem to get the most responses.
Because I think
again,
you were doing the recording, and Glenn was talking, if you like, talking
Yep.
to the spirit box, so to speak.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you asked it to say your name, to say Sarah, and you heard Sarah said out in the hallway. And
Yes.
you both went out there to have a look. And at the same time, you've got one voice coming through the spirit box saying, don't go. And yet you've got another voice, a different voice, coming through saying, get out.
Yes, so that I remember that video. That was in the drawing room, which is
Right.
next door to the dining room.
Right.
And look, they all know who we are, and they know who I am. And quite often, whenever we walk in and we turn on equipment, it will say my name or it will say Glenn's name. I mean, we go into the back room and. When we talk about Annie, she has we think a bit of a crush on Martin, for example, and we'll if he's not there, if we turn on the box out in her room, it just comes through with his name. Or usually, if one of us aren't there, the box will call out asking for the person that's not there. So it does know who we are, and quite often, when people come through. We were on a tour the other week and my name was coming through a lot, and it was this, deep, dark voice kept going, Sarah, and at one point it sounded like it even said my last name. And people were getting quite concerned for me and going, are you going to be okay? I'm like, I'm fine. I said, they're just saying hi. And they get quite scared and worried, that someone's being called out by name. But we're all used to it. We're used to their energies, and for us, it's cool. It means that they're validating that we're there and that they can see us.
Well, let's be honest. If a spirit can pronounce your surname and pronounce
I
it
know,
correctly,
because nobody can.
hey! I thought you said I pronounced it correctly.
You got close, very close. Very close. You said it right in the British accent.
I'll go and say it with an Australian accent then.
Oh, so we just say Chumacero.
Chumacero.
So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So if a spirit can pronounce it, you've got to give them brownie points for that.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, they got the... and again, we do know with those kind of devices too, there's what we call audio pareidolia, where sometimes the ear kind of hears what it wants to hear. So for me to hear my surname, quite possibly is my brain just, hearing something that sounds similar.
But if it's said along with your first name, if it's said in succession with your first name, it's probably more...
It's understanding the moments and knowing, sort of who's coming through in the conversations that you're having, then you kind of you can pick and choose what you want to believe is it's saying and what could be, audio pareidolia as well. So, sometimes the things that come through that thing are so clear that it makes me question what I believe sometimes because it's just too clear.
Yeah, sometimes I've used sort of spirit boxes like the SB7s and that kind of thing, and actually had a full-blown conversation, a very clear conversation. Yeah. And then other times you're sort of straining and it's not a clear answer, but the few times when it's been a full-blown conversation, you just have to start sort of, this is weird because this is like, it
doesn't normally happen this way.
No, and it is a proper conversation though. It's not sort of, it's not a bit like, I think one of the things with a novelist, when people use one of those is, they can sometimes take the answer that comes up and make their question fit the answer rather than the answer fit their question.
All the time. Yes.
And you can do that with a spirit box quite easily. But when it's actually so, how many people did you kill? Loads. That kind of is an answer, and that can start making you think, okay, there is some validity to this. And
and when it's several in a row, that's when my mind starts exploding, because I can go, okay, that's a coincidence or whatever. But when you're getting, several answers in a row, it's like, okay, I know the odds of that happening are just next to nothing. How can this be happening?
But it's like we've had this conversation about ovuluses. I know when you wrote that really good article on them, when you showed the probability of certain words coming up and everything, which is a really interesting article. If anyone has got that sort of scientific brain and wants to read it, you can go on Sarah's blog and have a look at it about the ovulus. But a few times when I've been using one and the answer that's come up is logical. So I think I told you about, I think I was at Highlands House and we had Venus come up on it, and it was like, well, why is it coming up with Venus? And it was actually the person I was with pointed into the hallway, like literally sort of 10 feet in front of us. What's that? And it was a statue of Venus.
Yeah.
Things like that is a bit like, well, that's quite coincidental. You know, how that either that is a very, very, very highly coincidental coincidence, or it is being utilised. Same with when you get, say, a REM pod going off in answer to a question. And it was at Highlands, which had a military background during World War II. It was almost sounded like Morse code, the way it was being used. Unfortunately, nobody knew Morse code, so we couldn't.
Oh, damn.
Exactly. But that's how it sounded, and it was just it was actually one of the guests who said, that sounds like Morse code. And as soon as she said that, there was just one long beep. Like, it was like, you've got it, you understand what I'm trying to do now. And it's things like that do make you think, well, you could actually sort of say it's just a form of pareidolia, like you say, you're sort of making yourself hear what you want to hear. But then other times it's like, well, that does seem to be an intelligent response.
And it's when other people hear it as well in the same way that you do. So if you're not saying to them, I hear this, but if they say to me, oh, I've just heard this, and you've heard the same thing, well, you're like, okay, well, two people have heard the exact same thing now. Yeah. I'm not influencing them in any way. Because if I say to someone, I hear this, then that's what they're going to hear. But, you know, if you've got more than one person hearing the same thing and it's clear, it opens my eyes a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I like one of the other experiments you did there where you were using the spirit box and you were asking questions, and I think Glenn had noise-cancelling headphones on, so he couldn't hear the questions you were answering, and he was giving you the answers as he was hearing them.
Yes, so it's just a lot of people feel that ghost boxes or spirit boxes, we were using an SB7 at the time, a lot of people feel that they're just picking up on radio chatter. And so that again, you know, like with Yovelist, people are just connecting, you know, gibberish with your questions. So we thought, if he can't hear what I'm asking and he's just saying what's coming through, and then the answers are matching my questions, maybe there's something there. So, you know, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't making sense, but then there, you know, was a block of time where, you know, I'd say, what's your name? And he would actually shout out a name. He didn't know I was asking for a name. Yeah. So, you know, that kind of stuff is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I found it interesting to watch. I did find it interesting to watch. So
we have to do it again, I think.
I think so. I think that was a very, very interesting experiment to see. I know where it would be good to do that. Arrowdale.
Yes. Absolutely.
That would
love
be
Arrowdale.
one I would love to see. I would love to see it done at Arrowdale.
We'll work something out.
Thank you. Thank you. So, has the house ever scared you?
Only once, because most of the time, you know, I have to lock up and, you know, set the alarms and all of that. And there was once we were there, and we were actually, Bill was with us as well. We had a few of his people there, and we were all just doing some filming and just doing some investigating. And it was almost like each person was getting picked off one by one, like each person was being affected in some way by the house. You know, we had some people that were crying just out of nowhere. And being overcome with emotion, other people feeling sick, some people feeling like they were being attacked or choked. All of a sudden we were in the dining room actually, and I went to go and sit on the chair, and then as I went to sit down, I for some reason I screamed, and I just became overwhelmed with fear. And I had to walk out of the house, and I couldn't go back inside, which is just not like me at all. And everyone's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I actually have no idea. I've just all of a sudden been overcome with this feeling of fear and feeling petrified. And I didn't even lock up that night. I wouldn't even walk inside to set the alarm. I had to get someone else to do it. It's never happened again. It's not something I normally do. It takes a lot to shake me.
Yeah.
But it was just this really strange experience where I can't even tell you what it was.
Wow.
That made me feel that way. As I said, everyone was just getting overcome with different emotions and feelings, and whatever it was it would install sadness onto one person and sickness onto another. Onto me, it gave fear for whatever reason.
That's weird. That is weird. So what's been your most memorable experience?
Probably it was after the first tour that we did at Black Rock House, and we were Carolyn, the president, was there, and she brought her daughter-in-law, Shirley, and Shirley is a medium, and she had been, you know, a person, she fell in love with Annie and her story, and after the tour she said, would I be able to go back in and just talk to Annie for a little bit? So we said, sure, no problem, we'll go in there. And we actually took the box that Glenn was using, with the pedals and things on the side.
The Marshall amp, yeah.
That can talk to us. He calls it the GD box. And so we took that into the room as well. And so she was sort of trying to see if she could make a connection to Annie and get some information from her. And as that was happening, she sensed the presence of this Thomas that I talked about earlier, the caretaker that sort of, doesn't let Annie talk or come out of her room. And she picked up that he was sort of standing at the door, and she started getting really bad tummy pains. And so she said to me, can you stand next to me and just rub my back and surround me with purple light so I can keep going and see what information I can get? And I'm like, sure. So I did that, and I mean, I'm not a psychic or anything like that, so I'm just imagining purple light with her and rubbing her back. And then all of a sudden I just started getting what was this excruciating pain in my stomach, and it felt like I was being stabbed, but not with a knife. It was a really bizarre feeling, and I hunched over and I just started saying, oh my God, I'm in a lot of pain. And I went backwards to the wall, and then all of a sudden I just sort of dropped to the floor, and I felt like I just felt this tall presence kind of standing over me, and I couldn't stand up, and it was almost like he was standing over me and I couldn't get up. And through the record, Glenn had this on camera, and what was happening at the time is the voices coming through the box at the time was saying, Sarah, it's your fault, as this was happening. And later on, after it happened, I went back in and I'm like, was this something against me? And I was told yes. And apparently they were upset because not long beforehand I had been the one to tell Annie that she had passed away. And apparently that caused, some issues, and that was my punishment, I guess, from this Thomas person. It
sounds to me like they were labour pains. If rubbing your back was helping,
yeah. It quite possibly could have been, and a lot of people have said that they, have there has been some sort of connection again with either childbirth or miscarriage or the pains that you have in connection with the pregnancy and birth. So it quite possibly could have been. It was the same pains the psychic was feeling.
Yeah, I'm just linking sort of things that you've said. The fact that Annie is there because of her son, and the pains you felt in her room sounded almost like labour pains.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's a maternal thing, if it was something to do with her son.
It could have been, I'd love to get you out there and see what you think. A lot of people seem to come, a lot of people, we don't tell people these things when they come in, and a lot of them don't know this information. They all come in and they all seem to have the same sort of physical connection feelings again in the stomach, and they have the same maternal, connection. And I think, again, that's why so many people resonate with Annie and her energy, because a lot of the women that come on our tours, a lot of people that come on our tours are women.
Yeah.
And most of them have children.
Yeah.
And so, perhaps that is why there is that connection there. Possibly. And why everyone loves Annie so much.
Possibly. Well, it's been absolutely awesome chatting to you, Sarah. I've really enjoyed it. I know we've been talking for quite a long time, but it has, isn't it? I know. Sarah's very lucky. She's got to go off for a birthday barbecue shortly, so we need to sort of close the interview up so she can get ready for that. But it's been absolutely awesome talking to you. What can you give us a teaser of any blogs you've got coming up that you're planning on at the moment?
Oh goodness, I don't plan them that far in advance. I have a list, and then when the inspiration hits, I'll start writing.
Okay.
But I have done a series called Tales of Blackrock House, which a lot of the stories I've spoken about today are in blog articles, and I sort of go into, you'll be able to see some photos of the house and what the inside looks like, and the different experiences and things that we've had. So that's under the blog Tales of Blackrock House. So I'm going to do some new installments based on, whenever new things happen. Okay. So that'll definitely be there. And just with the blog, besides doing all the articles, another thing I'm trying to do at the moment is just go around to all different places in Victoria and at least just get photos of them, and then just posting up some history linked, with how it looks now. A lot of people seem to enjoy that because they like seeing, what it looks like now, what it looked like back then, and why it's so special. Yeah. So I'm starting to share a lot of that as well on top of everything else. So
wonderful. So if anyone wants they just need to go and like your Living Life in Full Spectrum page, and they'll get to see all this stuff.
That's the best way. So if on Facebook, it's just Living Life in Full Spectrum Paranormal blog on Facebook, and there's links to the website, and pretty much you'll get the most out of liking the Facebook page, because a lot of the photos and things that I do on the Facebook page aren't on the website.
Brilliant. Well, do go and give Sarah some support. If you do want to learn any more about Blackrock, I believe they've got a Facebook page as well, haven't they?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
We've got one for Blackrock House Paranormal Tours, and then there's also the Friends of Blackrock House. So that's the committee that manage Blackrock House. So please support them as well.
Yeah, definitely.
They do a lot of work.
Definitely. We need to support our history around the world. We need to
Absolutely.
make, we need to go to these places, not just in the UK, but wherever you are, whether you're in America, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in France, whether you're in England, wherever it is. If you don't support this history and sort of learn about the past, it will be gone, and then you'll regret it. So do sort of be like Sarah and support these things and find ways for them to keep going and keep spreading their stories. But thank you so much, Sarah. I really do appreciate it. How do you fancy coming back sometime?
I would love to. I'll come back anytime. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. We'll get something sorted then. But so if anyone does want to suggest an idea for Sarah's blog, or they just want to have a chat with her about something she's done, go to her Living Life in Full Spectrum page. She's happy to chat to you. I'm saying this, I haven't checked with her that she's happy to chat to you.
Yeah, no,
absolutely
sure I am. I'll just block you if I don't like you.
Oh, so that's why you won't accept my messages anymore.
Yeah, sorry.
Just go and give her any ideas that you want. She's always happy to chat and say she's got an awful lot of knowledge. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. So Parasearch Radio shows on 6 nights of the week. You can catch them at any time. All you need to do is go to Spreaker or YouTube. We're always happy to hear from you. And all that really leaves me to say is have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.